Hello T-Dubbers, this is Brad with Bradley Performance Products. In today's video, we're going to show you how to install the fat tire rear conversion kit on your TW. To let you know what you're doing, here's a factory tire and wheel from a T-Dub. This is our 25-inch conversion. So as you can see, you're going from a 14-inch wheel with spokes and tubes down to a 12-inch ATV wheel that is obviously spokeless and tubeless and allows you to run a heavy ply tire. Our number one seller is this 25-inch 6-ply tire that is like a Maxxis Razor style tread. You can see that they're very similar in height, so the speed and the gearing of the bike remains about the same. The traction is dramatically increased, and like I said, it's nice to be spokeless and tubeless. We also do a 26 that just barely fits, but it does. And you can see the difference in how much more tire you have on the 26. It obviously does change your gearing. You would need to go larger on the rear sprocket or smaller on the front sprocket to accommodate. It does just barely clear the chain and the swing arm, but it does fit for those of you that really want to go to the extreme and want that monster rear tire. We have that as well, but we sell it with a 25, a 26, or you can buy just the wheel and the hub and no tire, or you can buy just the hub and get your own wheel and get your own tire. So here's the hub. This is the hub that allows you to bolt the ATV wheel into the rear of the TW200, and so it's going to come complete with bearings and wheel bolts. It's ready for your brakes and your sprocket, and then for the right side bearing, a couple spacers for a chain guard. I'll show you that in a minute. The biggest thing is getting this spacer out of the OEM rear wheel, the bearing spacer, it's about this long, to go in here. We don't sell it with it already in the hub because you already have one. It's in your rear wheel. You do need to remove it and put it in this hub. It is a big job. A lot of our customers want to just get this hub with the spacer in it already so they can leave their OEM rear wheel intact and not have to fight it. It is a terrible job getting that spacer out. If you've ever done rear bearings on one of these, which most people haven't, it's awful. To show you the picture, there is the rear bearing spacer. It's in there. You can see that it is between the bearings. So you're gonna have to pull out one bearing to get that spacer out and to put it in your hub. It's a terrible job, so we have the spacers if you want to just buy one and put a new one in it. Without further ado, let's get started. Okay guys, here's the tools that I use to do this job. Things just that make it easier. A hammer, a battery impact, some pliers, a little pry bar. But really, you're needing an 8mm, a 10mm, a 12, and a 14 to change the sprocket, the brakes, the tire, and the wheel. You need a 19 and a 22 to remove the axle. And that is it. You can do it with basically 4 or 5 wrenches and a crescent if you want it. It doesn't require hardly any tools at all. You can use a 8mm socket or a wrench for your chain guard, and that is it. So very limited number of tools you have to have. Okay guys, only one real permanent modification to the bike that has to be done to do this kit. I don't know why Yamaha did it this way, they just did. This bracket right here is the inner bracket that holds the inner portion of your chain guard. So your chain guard comes all the way down for some reason, like a mud flap on the inside, and hooks on this. With this big tire in here, it will no longer clear this bracket or this portion of the chain guard. So we are going to cut this off of the chain guard which again, is just plastic. But this is cutting, now again, it's very lightweight steel, but it is a little welded on tab there. So I'm going to come in with my grinder right here. You can use a hacksaw. You can almost cut this with shears. It's very thin. But we're going to remove this little bracket right here. That is a permanent modification, so you'll have to keep that in mind. You could weld it back on if you want, but it's not necessary. We're gonna need to remove that. Secondly, while we're here, I get questions asked, what's the washers for? The washers are to space this bolt out just 1/16 of an inch to keep the bolt from hitting the sprocket. So you'll just reinstall that as normal with the washers under the bolt heads, just like that. Okay guys, if you didn't already know, we're going to be removing all this stuff. So I'm going to start by pulling chain guard. I'm going to go ahead and pull this lower chain protection guard. Some of this is not necessary, but it makes life a lot easier. On this side over here, I'm going to go ahead and undo the brake wing nut, and I'm going to go ahead and loosen the axle and loosen the chain, pull the rear tire and wheel assembly out. Okay, so it's just that quick. Took me a couple minutes, but the rear tire and wheel assembly is out. Now we're going to need to pull the rear sprocket, move it over to the new hub, and we're going to pull the brake drum and move it over to the new hub. Okay guys, you're going to want to reuse or buy new your left side or sprocket side outer bearing seal. As you can see here, we're just going to pop it out and try to be careful to not damage it, and we're going to put that over in the other hub. Just like that. Okay. So you saw me reach to the back. I prefer to do it that way. You can come through with a wrench and get these 3 12mm nuts for the drum. Once those nuts are off, the drum comes off. That's all there is to it. Now, you can keep this for later if you want to swap back, if you want to leave your spacer in there. If you don't, the sprocket side has 2 bearings stacked back to back, and you will not get those out. It's terribly awful. The brake side, however, only has 1 bearing, and so with a blind bearing puller, you can pull this bearing. It is an ultimate tight press. I generally have to use a blind bearing puller and some heat around this hub to pull this bearing to get that spacer out. Okay, so I have our new hub, our tire and wheel. I'm going to go ahead and install the left side bearing seal. I'm going to place the hub inside the wheel, and the sprocket side comes through from the back and should be on the same side as the valve stem. Don't forget your axle spacer. You'll be hating life if you do. This bearing we left with looser tolerances than you find on the stock one because, like I said, you can't get it out of the stock one. We left it loose enough that you can take it in with reason, because you can get it back apart as necessary. Now we're going to take our brake drum and bolt our brake drum back to these three holes here.
These holes? These holes.
Okay, I'm not going to tighten these 3 nuts down right now. You can see this movement in the drum. We want to make sure that our drum is centered when we tighten it down, so we're going to do that last. I'm going to go ahead and put everything in the bike. I'm going to have someone hold the brake down, and as the brake is applied, it will obviously naturally center this drum. And while that is happening, I'm going to reach back here and snug these nuts. Put the assembly back in the bike. We don't want to forget about your axle spacers on both sides. And this is where it helps to either have somebody to help you or to have this jack to be able to get it right down where it's perfectly lined up and I don't have to lift anything. So just about like that. There we go. Tighten the chain. Okay guys, that's all there is to putting this thing together. It's not hard. I'm down to the part I was telling you about. I'm gonna have my assistant here hold the brake down to center this drum, and I'm gonna reach in here with a short wrench and snug these 3 12mm nuts down to make sure the brake is centered.
I'm your assistant.
Yeah, so I'm not gonna worry about you doing that, it's fine. Okay guys, I have loosely fitted the chain guard up here just for the purpose of marking. I have a marker here. You can see how tight we are now because this tire is so much wider. I'm just going to mark kind of the area where I need more clearance. And I'm going to take it back off, and this is where I'm going to trim the upper chain guard. Okay guys, so here's the section I've determined that I will trim off this upper chain guard. Most people probably don't even put it back on, to be honest with you, I'm seeing, but I'm going to go ahead and trim it nicely and clean up the cut and reinstall it. Okay guys, so that's it. It's done, it's installed. Make sure everything spins freely. It's a good time to obviously tighten and lubricate your chain, double check your work, double check everything that you have taken loose, especially all the important things. Don't forget the nuts on the back of the drum. Don't forget to adjust your brake out to the feel that you like, depending on where you're at in your adjustment. Obviously that affects the length of this brake rod. It's pretty good right there. All right, so that is it. Go enjoy it. Okay guys, one last thing. I get a lot of questions about how does it handle on the road. I do a lot of road riding. I don't need that because I ride on the road. How much air do you put in it? Things like that. What other tires will fit? So to answer a few of those questions, as you can see, the distance between the chain and the tire is just enough for a finger. So if you have a tire that has big lugs on the side of it, it won't clear. We developed this kit around this style tire because the sidewalls are relatively flat on these tires. They make awesome traction, unbelievable off-road traction, and they seem to live forever on the highway. I don't think I've ever replaced one, and we've been running this kit for like 10 years. Since I built the first one. This is the tire of choice, and I run about the amount of air that you would run in it if it were on a four-wheeler. I only run 5 or 6 pounds of air in it. It is a very stiff tire. It's a 6-ply. I think some of them come in an 8-ply. So we run very low air pressure. You can improve highway driving performance with more air pressure. It will feel more like stock. However, is there a big difference between having this kit on the highway and your OEM tire? In my opinion, no. The TW doesn't go fast enough to be able to tell a difference. It is literally, it feels the same. This tire is louder going down the road so you can hear it, but as far as the handling, it feels the same to me. I hope that answers a few of your questions on that. Again, guys, I really appreciate you and hope that you like and subscribe and leave comments below. Thanks again.